Welcome to Creative Movies Recapped. Today's recap is a 2018 sci-fi action thriller titled Venom. Watch out for spoilers. Before we dive in, please subscribe to support our channel. The film begins with a spaceship crash landing on Earth in Malaysia. Unusual living organisms labeled as symbiotes are retrieved from the spaceship. Meanwhile, a science facility under the control of a powerful corporate tycoon, Carlton Drake, performs experiments with these symbiotes in an attempt to merge them with human test subjects. The facility known as Life Foundation deploys its crew to recover the samples of the symbiotes' organisms, which were initially 4 samples in total. The crew discovers a badly injured astronaut who survived the crash and carries him into an ambulance. The astronaut suddenly gets up with the symbiote organism in him and viciously attacks the young woman and driver, leading to a bad ambulance crash. A few minutes later, the symbiotic organism gets inside the young woman's body and freely walks out of the ambulance to look for the rest of the symbiotes. Life Foundation facility later discovers that 1 sample of the 4 symbiotes escaped and decides to transport the remaining 3 to their research facility in San Francisco, where they find out that the symbiotes cannot survive without oxygen-breathing hosts. The film introduces Eddie Brock, an investigative journalist in San Francisco, who will risk anything to get to the bottom of a story and expose those doing wrong to society. Brock's editor assigns Brock to cover Life Foundation CEO, Carlton Drake. While investigating Life Foundation, Brock secretly reads about some experimental human trials in a confidential document emailed to his fiancée, Anne Wayne, an attorney preparing a lawsuit defense for the Life Foundation. Later on, Brock interviews Carlton Drake and confronts him using the confidential information he stole from his fiancée. In an attempt to expose Carlton Drake and uncover allegations that the company received, Eddie Brock is fired from his job and loses everything, including his entire career and his fiancée, who also ends up losing her job. Meanwhile, the 4th symbiote that escaped earlier continues to claim lives and jump from one host to another for survival. 6 months later, we meet the now broke and miserable Eddie Brock trying to make ends meet. On the other hand, Carlton Drake continues to conduct a series of experiments with the 3 symbiote-suitable hosts that can survive the symbiosis process, using the city's homeless population as his test subjects. When the first test subject is locked inside with the symbiote organism, he fails to survive the process, but Drake proceeds to order more human test subjects, convinced that his trials are closer to success. One of Drake's leading scientists, Dora Skirth, who appears disgusted by Drake's methods that lead to deaths, approaches Brock to ask for his help in exposing Drake. Brock refuses and recalls the faulty interview with Carlton Drake that cost him everything he cared about. After a short while, Brock agrees and Skirth helps him break into the research facility to search for evidence. Brock learns that an acquaintance of his, named Maria, is one of the test subjects. Maria begins screaming for help and Brock attempts to rescue her. In the process, the symbiote possessing Maria transfers to Brock's body without him realizing it, leaving Maria dead. The security guards are alarmed and Brock escapes. He begins displaying bizarre symptoms like superhuman strength and speed and an adverse reaction to high-pitched noises. Brock develops an appetite for weird food choices like rotten meat and appears to have a fever. He then starts to hear a low, growling voice speaking to him. Drake and his crew find Maria's body and discover that there is a symbiote sample on the loose. Drake gets Skirth to admit that Brock was involved, and he leaves her inside a cell to get killed by another symbiote. Drake then sends a team of mercenaries led by Roland Treese to retrieve the symbiote from Brock. Meanwhile, Brock, in a state of confusion, begins looking for Anne to ask for her help. He finds Anne on a date with Dan, her new boyfriend, who is also a doctor. Brock appears messed up, begins going through other people's food, and then sits in a lobster tank to eat live lobsters. Anne and Dan are concerned and decide to figure out a way to help him. Dan does an MRI test on Brock, but the frequency noise from the test causes a painful distortion in Brock's head. Anne and Dan later inform Brock that a parasite is living inside his body. Treese and his goons break into Eddie's home to capture him. Brock tries to surrender, but the symbiote has other plans. As the mercenaries attack, Brock finds himself fighting them off involuntarily with the help of the symbiote, which talks to him and warns him of any danger. Brock manages to escape while involuntarily jumping from one building to another. Treese records Brock fighting with the symbiote inside him and shows it to Drake. Drake is amazed that Brock is a fitting match for the symbiote and is still alive. More mercenaries start to show up and Brock finds a motorcycle. He rides through the city with Drake's men closely behind him, determined to capture Brock. Brock maneuvers through the city easily, as the symbiote enables him to perform extraordinary moves. After a while, Treese slams into Brock with his car and badly knocks Brock down, breaking his legs. As he approaches Brock, the symbiote overtakes Brock's whole body, transforming him into a monstrous symbiote. The symbiote attempts to kill Treese, but another mercenary distracts him and the symbiote ends up biting his head off and then escapes. Back in the facility, it is revealed that the symbiote that killed Skirth died as well, which makes Drake furious. Drake instructs Treese and his men to avoid killing Brock until they can find another suitable host for the symbiote. After escaping, Brock then finds himself near a lighthouse where his bones are miraculously healed. The symbiote shows itself to Brock and introduces itself as Venom. Venom proceeds to tell Brock that if he wants to survive, he needs to only comply. Brock heads to his former workplace to deliver the evidence of Carlton Drake's crimes to his former boss. He fails to gain access at the entry, but Venom helps him climb to the top of the building and break in. Venom then admits that he has developed a liking for Brock and he is a great host. After leaving the evidence, Brock tries to leave, only to notice armed SWAT officers surrounding the area. Venom and Brock cooperate and manage to fight them all. Anne shows up and sees Venom transforming back into Brock. Anne is convinced that something is completely wrong with Brock and takes him to Dan's office to seek help. Venom tells Brock to talk to Anne and apologize for his screw-ups, though Anne tells him it's not the right time for that kind of talk. Meanwhile, Drake's drone continues to follow them from behind. Back in Drake's facility, the symbiote finds its way to San Francisco from Malaysia, now inside a young girl. The symbiote takes over Drake's body as the new host. Dan and Anne explain that the symbiote is rotting Brock's internal organs and that he and the symbiote are essentially draining each other of life. Brock notes that the symbiote has two weaknesses: high-pitched noises and fire. Anne then uses an MRI machine, and the noise irritates Venom, therefore separating him from Brock. Brock appears relieved and hurriedly walks out, leaving Venom locked inside a cell. Venom escapes through the vents and latches itself onto a dog. Treese and his men finally capture Brock trying to escape and takes him to Drake. Anne finds the dog that is hosting Venom, and he takes over Anne's body and heads to the Life Foundation facility. Drake starts interrogating Brock about the whereabouts of the symbiote. Brock continuously claims he knows nothing and makes Drake furious. The symbiote in Drake forms around his body, which introduces itself as Riot. Brock learns that Drake's plan is to head back into space and find more symbiotes to bring back to Earth for them to use humans as hosts and take over Earth. Drake storms out and informs Treese that he can now do whatever he wants to do with Brock. Treese leads Brock into a forest to take his life, but Venom, inside Anne's body, helps Brock and bites Treese's head, and then transfers Venom back to Brock through a kiss. Venom and Brock head off to find Drake and Riot before they board the rocket to head to space. Venom explains to Brock that he wanted more symbiotes of his kind to come to Earth and use humans as hosts to survive, and admits that he was beginning to enjoy living on Earth where he feels more powerful than on his planet. Venom then admits that he changed his mind due to his and Brock's interactions and they should stop Riot and Drake to save mankind and planet Earth. A vicious fight occurs between Riot and Venom. The Riot symbiote appears more powerful and almost takes down Venom. Anne turns on a frequency, and the noises force both the symbiotes to leave the host's body. Drake and Brock continue fighting as Drake attempts to reattach himself to Riot, but Brock kicks him off the ledge. Brock turns around and gets suddenly impaled by Riot, who then boards the rocket as it starts to lift off. Venom finds Brock badly injured and latches back onto him, healing the impalement wound. They then leap onto the rocket as Venom cuts open the fuel line, causing the rocket to explode with Drake and Riot inside. The fire flames from the rocket cause Venom to separate from Brock's body as Brock falls into the water and survives. Sometime later, Brock and Anne appear to have mended their relationship as friends. Anne sympathizes with Brock as she believes that Venom died in the explosion. Brock then mentions being asked to bring his show back and do a piece on Drake, but he mentions that he is no longer interested and he has other plans. It also turns out that Venom is still living inside Brock, though Brock keeps that a secret from Anne. Brock walks around with Venom and tries to explain to him that if they are going to stick together, then he cannot just eat any person he wants and that they may only target the really bad people. Brock goes into a shop, and a thug attempts to accost the seller for money. Brock turns into Venom and eats the thug. Brock asks Venom what they should do next, and he responds that they can do whatever they want. That's all for today's recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.